Hello everyone, I'm Matt Mitrich, the Alternate Historian, and welcome to my 5,000 subscriber Q&A session. First off, thank you guys so much, not just for subscribing to my channel, but sticking with me. I mean, I know I'm pretty amateurish when it comes to YouTube videos, and I'm sure you guys have subscribed to channels who are in qualities a lot better than I am, but I'm glad that you still like the content and are still willing to stick with me while I try to figure out this whole YouTube thing. So I really do appreciate it. It's really awesome that you guys and me can just be on this journey of alternate history together, and it's great. And I'm happy just to say, yeah, 5,000 subscribers. It's very wonderful. I'm very grateful to you guys, to everybody. Thank you so much. A few orders of business I want to get through. I know the quality of my audio quality of my videos has been pretty poor, as some people have pointed out in the comments. So I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm using a different microphone. So hopefully that improves the quality of the videos a little bit, the audio quality that is. If not, let me know and I'll try to figure something else out. I'm still working on this, so hopefully this sounds better and we can all just put that technical issue behind us, hopefully. I'm just going to kind of tell you guys how I feel without trying to be too polished, because I want it to be more realistic, sort of like maybe an actual like panel at a convention. Someone's asking me questions, and so I'm kind of just improving it in a way. So yeah, without any further ado, let's begin. The first question is, who do you think the best U.S. president was and why? And that was asked by Friendly Mango. The best U.S. president is a very difficult thing to say, but at least the one I always like to point to when I argue who the best president is, in my opinion, is James K. Polk. I like him because for a variety of reasons. One, he was this kind of guy who sort of just came out of nowhere. He was definitely a dark horse kind of candidate, and he was elected president, and he had specific things he was going to do. He was going to get Oregon, he was going to get California, he was going to reform the tariff, he was going to establish an independent treasury system, and then if he did all those kind of things, he was going to leave the presidency. And not only did he meet every single one of his main campaign goals, promises, after he did it in 4 years, he was like, all right, bye, see ya. And not only do I think that's pretty awesome, something you don't really see a lot from presidents, he did it during a time where, his history doesn't tend to look too kindly on the American presidents. The post-Jackson, pre-Lincoln presidencies, who generally seem to be either some very mediocre presidents or some of the worst presidents we've ever had. And I think part of the issue is because that was, as we got closer to the Civil War and things were getting more intense, and and that's probably like one of the major criticisms of Polk, is that he really didn't do anything to, regarding slavery, to stop it, to prevent a civil war. But considering that no one before Lincoln did anything to stop the Civil War, I kind of give him somewhat of a break, because at the very least, he at least did some things that I think helped the country in the long run. But, by expanding to the West, by keeping things relatively civil, during his 4 years, and I think he did the best he could given the situation he was given. I think based on that, he's probably at least my favorite presidents. Now, people could probably argue that doesn't make him the best president. There were certainly other presidents who were better. Theodore Roosevelt always comes to mind when I think of some of the best presidents. Abraham Lincoln, FDR, people like that who were presidents during some. Not so much Roosevelt, but presidents who were people who were president. Well, Theodore Roosevelt, not Franklin Roosevelt. People who were president during some pretty traumatic times and led the country. And while they might have done some controversial things, in the end, history kind of looks at them pretty kindly. What's your favorite sci-fi setting or aesthetic? And that was asked by Cam Medina. That's a difficult question. I've always liked a good space opera. I like just the huge galaxy-wide culture and all the kind of crazy stuff and the world building that goes into that. I've always really enjoyed that. In terms of like aesthetics that kind of like work into what this channel does, alternate history, I kind of always like diesel punk. I don't know. Steampunk's very popular, but I think diesel punk just looks a lot cooler to me. I guess that's mostly just a very subjective thing. I also like the setting more, than whole 1930s kind of culture, and you still get a lot of things you see in steampunk, like airships, but then you also and some giant robots. You see some giant robots in steampunk, but I don't like so much the British as kind of aesthetic that going on here. You know, Diesel Punk's got a very more American feel to it, which I kind of like, being an American myself. And also, you just don't see it as much. So when you do see it, it's really cool. So yeah, I definitely do like the diesel punk aesthetic. Next question. Oh, another thing I want to say. Yeah, I got a lot of questions. Which, first off, thanks. But second off, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them and give really detailed, long answers. So hope you guys don't mind. Next question. What do you think has changed from old styles of alternate history to newer styles of alternate history? And that was asked by Iman Winslow. The first sort of like alternate historians were mostly counterfactual historians. They were historians, sometimes speculating a little bit about what the world might be if something didn't happen. And that was pretty much the standard up until, with a few exceptions, but that was pretty much the standards up until the beginning of the 20th century, where you started getting the more pulpy science fiction. So you saw time travel, parallel dimensions, magic, or just various other sort of like science fiction, which I think is one of the reasons why alternate history is sort of lumped into the science fiction as a science fiction subgenre because of that. Because you got some of these early sci-fi writers writing stories that were alternate history, and then because of that, you tended to get alternate history stories sort of like categorized with science fiction books, alternate history books, kind of categorized with science fiction books. I'm not sure if I said that wrong, and so that's sort of happened. But then as time went on, you started to get less sci-fi and more historical, like fiction-esque kind of works. You sort of saw this at first with Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle, but I feel like you really started seeing that much more often by the 1980s, and that's when you started getting a lot more authors coming into the field of science fiction who had backgrounds in history, and so they tended to write what they knew, and they knew history. So when they wrote science fiction stories, they're more often than not alternate history stories. And while they sometimes did use time travel and parallel dimensions and magic and all that kind of stuff, other times they just wrote stories that were, as I mentioned before, like more historical fiction, except the history was different. And that's pretty much the standard right now we see for mainstream alternate history, where you see a lot of just like, you still see the science fiction sort of like tropes, like time travel and things like that, but you still also see a lot more historical fiction. However, I would also argue that when the internet was created and became more popular, you started to see a divergence, a divergence to the way stories were written, based on sort of like web originals. And one of the popular ways of doing it has been to sort of follow the For Want of a Nail story format, which is sort of like almost like a fake textbook. There really isn't any characters, there really isn't a story per se. It's just the world building that you would see in a lot of the mainstream alternate history works, and that's it. And you just see this world, and you see what would have normally have been thrown out by the author. I mean, they might have had a general outline idea what they wanted the world to look like, but they rarely put it in because they were trying to tell a story. So they kept to the characters and the plot and all that kind of stuff. And that's what you kind of see a lot online. And so you have these like two versions of alternate history that are sort of like existing parallel to each other. You have the mainstream version, which tends to follow the normal narrative, but and can kind of range from just like historical fiction to, you know, just general science fiction and fantasy. And then you have the more not more mainstream, but the internet kind of based alternate history, which tends to be just like fake textbooks, and with a few exceptions, but that seems to be the normal. So hopefully that answered your question about how alternate history has changed over the years. When will you do SSGB book or show? And that question was asked by Adam Brash. My initial plan was to do a plausibility review of SSGB and maybe a thoughts on with Elena or somebody else when the show was released in the US, because so far I think it's only been released in the UK and not the US. Excuse me for a second, coffee break. But that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. I thought I read somewhere that the Weinsteins had bought the rights to distribute it in the US, but I haven't heard anything since then. There hasn't been any plans, I think possibly because it didn't do so well in the UK. I mean, I know there's fans of it, people who have defended it, but I also know I've seen a lot of articles saying that it wasn't very good. And now I haven't seen it, so I can't say whether it is good or not. I'm only telling you what I've heard. So based on that, I have no idea when it's going to come to US, because that was my plan, was as soon as that happened to put out videos in conjunction with that. But now that I don't know when it's going to come out, I don't know when I'm going to do it. Perhaps I'll just go ahead and do it myself, or if some patron asks me to review it, I'll do it then. But at the moment, I don't know. It's TBA when I'm actually going to do any videos regarding SSGB. I do want to, but I just don't know when I'm going to do it. Will anything interesting ever happen in South America? And that question was asked by Ryan69. Absolutely not. At least in my cliche timeline series, and I really should work on putting out another one soon. But that is an interesting question, and I will hopefully answer it a bit more in the next question I'm going to answer. Do you know any good alternate history based in Latin America? By Matt Dragoon. It is an interesting kind of trope in alternate history that nothing really happens in South America, and that's partially because, and I make this mistake as much as anybody, that no one really knows that much about South American history. Again, I'm not trying to knock any of my South American viewers. It's just something that is, especially in the Anglo world, events in South America really aren't taught to us, and if they are, it's very like indirectly, like we know the Spanish and Portuguese colonized you, and that's pretty much about it. And you got your independence eventually, and Cold War stuff, intervention, dictatorships, blah blah blah. And again, I'm not trying to offend anybody. This is just what we were taught, and I know that's wrong, and I know that I'm failing with history by not knowing that much. I probably know a little bit more than some people do, but I know a lot less than I really should have. That's something that all alternate historians, especially in the English-speaking world, struggle with. So I do want to recommend a few alternate histories that were set in Latin America. First off, there's Treasure Fleet by Daniel Benson, which recently won the Short Form Alternate History Award this year, so definitely check out that story. I'm going to mispronounce this because I haven't heard anyone actually say it. It's just been something I've read. But then there's also The Guns of Tawan Tisuya by Robert Perkins. This is something you can find on alternatehistory.com. I think, which is then there's also Chaos by Max Sinister. This story isn't technically set in South America, but Max does a good job making sure to actually cover events in detail in South America. So while it's set across the world, you still get a lot of details in South America. And then there's also Look to the West by Thomas Anderson, which you can pick up from Sea Lion Press. I think book 1 is called Diverge and Conquer. And I'll try to link to all of these stories so that you can find ways to get to them. Look to the West, again, just like Chaos, it's not primarily set in South America, but it doesn't ignore the continent. So those are some stories to start with. And I'm sure there's others out there, but I will definitely link to those. And if anyone has any other recommendations, please share them in the comments with everybody. Moving right along. What is your favorite alternate history trope? And this was asked by James A. Clowder. You know, I have a very different definition of what I consider cliche and trope. Generally, tropes are something that I kind of look more favorably on, while cliches are something I don't. And at the same time, though, the problem is when I was trying to answer this question, I noticed there was a lot of like overlap between tropes and scenarios. Sorry if anyone heard my phone go off there. You know, sometimes popular scenarios can also be considered tropes, but sometimes a trope can be just an airship, which isn't technically a scenario. It's just something that appears, and it's very confusing. So I decided really to hopefully answer this question in the next question, which is, what are your top 5 favorite scenarios by Johan Hagstrom? Again, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. This is difficult. I'm going to give you my 5 favorite scenarios, and not really in any sort of order. And I am going to look at this because even I have trouble remembering them. First one is the British space. The first one is the British space program. I've known some people argue that this was probably very difficult because Britain would be recovering from World War II and wouldn't have the capital to put into a space program. But occasionally people have tried writing stories, Ministry of Space being one of them, that I find somewhat believable, even if it's kind of a stretch plausibility-wise. And I kind of always just like the idea of more countries having space programs besides just the 2 superpowers. And I've always thought that would make very interesting to see what space exploration would be like if America and Soviets were alone trying to put people into space. Then there's the alternate colonization of eastern seaboard of North America. I like the idea of, I mean, like, what if other countries besides Britain dominated the eastern seaboard? I would have really liked to see, like, you know, the Dutch, the Swedes, have more successful colonization. I would like to see other countries, maybe let's have, you know, like the French as well, who were another major power at the time in North America, be able to have some, you know, being able to have some more staying power, essentially. I would like to see Native American states, because of all these competing European powers, able to play one off the other and actually survive and form into some sort of like country and compete with these different whatever comes out of the colonies, and just have a balkanized North America, not because one of the major states, the United States most primarily, falls apart, but because there are different cultures who are founded and are interacting with each other and creating new ones, and I've always enjoyed those type of stories more. Next one is alternate Israel. Talked a little bit about this in Pin the Zion on the Map Trope Talk episode. There were so many plans to sort of create a homeland for the Jews that it's just fascinating to think of what it would be like if there was a Jewish state in pretty much. There's been a proposal for a Jewish state pretty much in every single continent in America, except for, not America, so every single continent on Earth, except for perhaps Antarctica, and I'm sure someone has written some story about a Jewish state being built on Antarctica, maybe in some domed cities, which would be really cool. And so it's endless possibilities about what you can do in stories. I love seeing that, and I love learning about all these sort of obscure bits of Jewish history. Next one is the Irish Empire. The idea of the Irish, just as a bit of historical irony, kind of creating an empire instead of the British, and just having fun with that. It's not very plausible. It is cliche, but it just makes me laugh, and I like seeing people try to do it and what they kind of come up with, and it's fun. I just find it fun. The fifth one and final is an optimistic timeline with a POD set in the 20th century. I kind of like timelines that try to be optimistic, and while some people will probably argue that they're not very plausible, they're, in my opinion, they're different. At the very least, they're different, and it's just not another, like, man, this world sucks. And it's just like, once in a while, I just want to see someone say, you know, we could have probably have done things better, and here's how I think we could have done it. And I like that. And I would wish we could see a little bit more of that instead of always going pessimistic with our timelines. Next question. Do you think the race from Harry Turtle's World War series would stand a chance against us if it invaded the world of the Turtle Dove's Southern Victory series? And this was asked by Midway, 1942. The world of Timeline 191 was pretty similar to our world. So, technologically speaking, so I would argue that it probably would end up roughly the same way, sort of. You know, the names and faces of the victorious Big Ugly states, not victorious, but surviving Big Ugly states would be a little different, but generally speaking, they would still be there. There might be some differences, but it would probably end up the same. Actually, I would probably argue that the race might even have more trouble, because I think that there were a lot more nuclear powers in the Timeline 191 series than there were in the World War series. I think in the World War series you had U.S., Germany, the Soviet Union. Did Britain get some nuclear weapons? I don't remember, but I remember in the Timeline 191 series you definitely had the Americans, the Confederates, the British, the French, the Germans, I think the Russians maybe, but you would have a lot more powers. Plus, Japan would be in a better position at the start of the war than it was in our timeline. And so I wonder if even because of that, the race might even be more liberal with their nuclear weapons uses just to knock them out. And if that would, in fact, they might, I don't know, maybe in that sense they might do better if they're willing to take a scorched earth kind of policy to defeating the Big Uglies. So it's difficult. I guess it just really depends on how better off the Big Ugly nations are in the Timeline 191 series versus the World War series. That's. I'm sorry if it seems sort of like, because this is pure speculation on my part, but I think that it would either be the same or the lizards would just nuke the planet from orbit until there was no resistance. But my guess is they wouldn't do that even in this kind of scenario. So, no, pretty much the same. What is your political standing? And that is asked by Simon Petrikov. I actually had this question asked more than once. So I'm going to give a very short answer to this one. It's complicated. I don't really consider myself liberal, conservative, moderate, independent, blah, blah, blah. I guess moderate, but even then it seems such a simple word for what is essentially a complicated situation. And I am not going to try to explain it all on a video, because I'm sure I'm not going to do it right. Maybe one day I might actually, if people are really interested, although why are you, considering this is an alternate history channel and not a politics channel, I might write something up about my political beliefs, and then hopefully satisfy you or infuriate many of you. I try to be fair. There are videos where I mock liberals and there's videos where I mock conservatives, and while some people in the comment section don't agree with that statement, all you have to do is watch my videos to show that I do that. So not sure why anyone would act like I don't. So yeah, that's my answer, is really no answer. It's complicated, and I am definitely not going to answer it on an unscripted Q&A session. So sorry. What if the USR won the Cold War? And that was asked by OnlyBro555. I said I wasn't going to do what if questions because I usually reserve those for my patrons at the $5 level. So if you guys want to get me to make an entire video on a what if question you want to ask, become one of my patrons at the $5 level. Not only get you get a video where I will answer a what if question for you, you also get a chance to see videos usually 24 hours before anyone else does. So and it would help the channel out. You know, if I get extra money, I get better equipment, like a microphone. And that, I think, it would help the channel grow and make better videos in the long run. So there was a lot of what-if questions I got that I refused to answer because I said I wasn't going to answer them, so there you go. But I will sort of answer this question. And that's only simply because I have gotten a patron request to answer this very same question. I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I think it's going to be not the next video, but the video after that. But I will be putting a video out asking that very question. So OnlyBro555, if you can wait a few more weeks, you're going to get your answer. So there we go. Moving right along. Do you plan to post more often in the near future? And that was asked by the Johnson. I have a day job, like hopefully like many of you do, or if you're in school, that's your day job now. So that takes out a lot of my time that I could spend making videos. On top of that, I have a daughter who is going to be 2 months in a couple of days. And as some of you who might be parents could probably guess, that's a very time-consuming job to have, to be a parent. Even when I have my wonderful wife Elena to help me with that, it's still very difficult, especially when she has a job as well. So my time now is very limited. And while I would love at the very least to put out a video a week, more likely than not, I'm going to be putting a video out every like 2 to 3 weeks. And that's unfortunate, but it's just sort of where my life is right now. Again, maybe if the channel continues to grow, if the YouTube doesn't decide to get rid of all of their small channels through the adpocalypses that we're having pretty much on an almost monthly basis, it seems, maybe I can put out a video at least once a week. But right now it's every 2 to 3 weeks. I'm probably more realistic, or whenever I can just do it. And sorry guys, thanks for having patience with me, doing the best I can to have a sort of somewhat regular schedule, but it's right now I'm just really running this channel by the seat of my pants. It's tough to run a channel and also work full-time and be a parent and do all the other kind of things I'm supposed to do as a normal adult. Not trying to make excuses, I'm just being honest. Life's tough. All right, next question. What alternate history novels or book series would you like to see adapted into a TV series or miniseries? And that was asked by creator user. 1932 series, the City Shard series by Eric Flint, for a variety of reasons. One, it's already an epic alternate history in its own right. There's just, I don't even know how many not only published works, they have so many published novels that go off on different sort of like storylines, and then they also have a bunch of like short fiction that are constantly published, that are either printed or posted online, and they have a huge community of people working this. You have this massive amount of canon to pull from, with a huge cast of characters, both from our own timeline and not from our present. I can't remember exactly what year they came from, but also from the 17th century, and you got what essentially is the Game of Thrones of alternate history just sitting there, and you have stories. There's been plenty of TV shows set in the 17th century, so it shouldn't be that difficult, in my opinion, to create sort of a period drama with people from our own timeline, dressed in their own clothes and doing stuff. And it would just be really cool to see like some 17th century army marching, and suddenly they're attacked by rednecks in pickup trucks and modern weaponry and things like that. I mean, it would just be awesome to see, and there would be so many cool cameos from Cromwell and other people, Richelieu and things like that, and just so many things you can do, and it would be so easy, and it pretty much writes itself, because you have this massive canon to pull from, and all you got to do is read it, and you can easily make scripts out of this. And I do know that 1632 has been optioned, and occasionally Eric will mention updates on it, but it's so far nothing's going on. It would be really cool to do. I would really love to see it. It's just time travel, 17th century drama and action and things like that. It'd be great, and I would love to see it done, and it should be done, but I have no idea when it ever will be done. Do you have any plans for non-history related content? Kjell Ertesvag asked that question. I know I pronounced that wrong. I'm sorry. Nothing definite, but that brings me to my next question. Are you interested in future history speculation, which does involve similar route of thinking to alternative history? And that was asked by Mary Landbrony. You will see a lot of like alternate history forums, including alternatehistory.com, have a future history forum, because a lot of like the thinking and logic necessary, I'm kind of tripping on my own word here, that go into crafting alternative scenario often goes into a future history scenario, because it does require weapon knowledge of the past and or present, and sort of thoughts of like where we're going. And the future history, unlike just science fiction, is a little bit more, well, at least people who write future history tend to try to go more for plausibility here. They're not trying to create a space opera. They're actually they tend to be very hard in terms of their science fiction, because they're using real physics essentially and real science. And a lot of alternate historians write that, and I've always wanted to perhaps do a video just talking about that, and just how the two genres are sort of intertwined and overlap, and how people who tend to write alternate history tend to be also turn themselves into also imagining future histories, because in many ways alternate historians are science fiction fans, and science fiction is about the future, and just as future history is, but future history tends to be on the more plausible side, just like your average online alternate historian strives for plausibility as well. So perhaps someday in the future I'll do a future history video. In fact, I should probably write that down so I don't forget. And I think it'll be a really good time to do. Yeah, I think you guys will enjoy it. So that's hopefully answers 2 questions. Next question. What would you like to see in a Civil War alternate history that isn't cliche? And that was asked by Colin Calkins. Not all cliches are necessarily bad. It's just you see it so often, just hearing it again sort of turns me off to, a lot of people's American Civil War alternate histories. But that doesn't necessarily mean that someone can't do something new with it. And so while I would love to see someone do their research and probably find some obscure bit of Civil War history to sort of highlight in their story, I don't mind always if they do use a cliche, as long as they do something different with it, something new, take a different route, subvert it for the very least. It's just that I want to see something I haven't seen 1,000 times before, and I don't know what that could be, because I will know it when I see it. But there's just so many things that have been done so before, and I wish that people, when they actually set off to write I feel like so many times when I see new Civil War stuff, the people who write it seem to have no idea about this library of stuff that's come before. They seem to be in this idea that they're the only ones who've ever done it before, which is silly in the age of Google, when you can just sort of look up and see all of what's all been done before. You don't have to read it completely, but you can see the ideas are there. And I swear to God, I have seen a couple times, just this year alone, in some forum or group, where someone said, I don't think anyone's ever asked this before, but what if Lee won Gettysburg? And maybe they were joking, maybe they're just trolling everybody, but sometimes I honestly think they're so new to the genre, they really don't know. And I guess I can forgive them for that, but at the same time, it's like, really, guys? You didn't look. You didn't once type that into Google yourself and it's just see the mountain of people who have asked that same question come before you. It's just like, really? Whatever. Anyway, moving right along. Do pineapple and anchovies belong on pizza? And this was asked by Sam McDonald. You can put whatever you want on pizza. I don't care. I live in Chicago, and I put ketchup on hot dogs, and some people will scream at me about how horrible that is. But here's the thing. I'm an adult, and I can do whatever the fuck I want without hurting anybody or breaking the law or anything like that. And if I want to put ketchup on pizza, great. If I want to eat pizza with pineapple on it, I can. All right? I am not required to. There's just so many other more important things going on in the world other than what you put on food. And while I like a Chicago-style hot dog, I also like just putting ketchup on it and moving on with my life. That doesn't make me a child. That doesn't make me less of a man. I'm an adult. I can do what I want within reason. And what I want to do and what I like to eat is ketchup on a hot dog. Now, do I personally like pineapple on a pizza, or what was the thing, anchovies? No, although anchovies is a lot more normal on a pizza. A lot of people put anchovies on a pizza. Anchovies are delicious. I don't know what people are so uptight about. Although I know people who won't eat most vegetables. Adults who won't eat most vegetables. So whatever. Put whatever you want on whatever you want to eat, and as long as you like it, I don't care. Maybe, who knows? Maybe you'll start a food trend. You can open up a small business where you sell weird foods and you make a ton of money. You're able to retire at a young age. Go ahead. Great. I don't care. It is so interesting how people get so angry about condiments and toppings and things like that. It's just, I'm an adult. You're an adult. We can both like different things when it comes to food, and it doesn't impact our lives whatsoever. All right. Next question, and we're getting near the end here. What alternate history video is your favorite? Sunwheat. That is tough. I'm assuming you're mentioning my videos, so I'm going to answer that question like that, and that would have to be a toss-up between my video on space-filling empires and also my video on that alternate history map that ended up in the textbook. I really liked the space-filling empire video because that was a video where Mark Pasquin, who's my title card creator, helped me a lot with that one and creating some pretty cool effects and things like that. And I had a lot of fun making that with him. And the video's done well, and I think I made some pretty good points. I hope to. It was a fun video to make, which saw some cool stuff, and I really enjoyed doing that with Mark. And as for my the textbook map video, that one just made me laugh because it's just amazing that it happened in the first place. This was people who should have known better, who should have known what they were doing, who shouldn't have just gone on Google and picked the first map they saw. And it's one thing if you share a map online. People do it all the time and think an alteration map online, think it's real. That's happened before. One of my most popular videos is that one. But this one was like, they should have known better. They should have done their homework and sourced it correctly like they should have, and they didn't. And I think it's hilarious, and I am never going to let that go and never stop talking about it and never pointing it out to people because I don't want her to see that again. I don't want my daughter coming home with her history book and showing alteration map showing up with it because can forgive somebody who doesn't have that strong of a background in history or alternate history for that matter. I can't forgive someone whose job it is to teach history. And you can just say, well, they're a publisher, they're not a teacher. It's like, no. They're putting together something to teach someone history. That means they're having people write this book who understand history. You guys This is your job. You're being paid for this. And if you can't do it right, you shouldn't be paid for it anymore. You should lose your job. This is very important to me because people don't know history. And part of the problem is you have people working in education in one field, one way or the other, who are doing a shitty job. And this video highlights that. And I am not going to forgive that. I'm not going to stop talking about that. I'm not going to stop making fun of that. You screwed up. You should be punished for that by me mocking you forever online. So yeah, those are my 2 favorite videos. All right, last question. What alternate history book would you recommend to first-time readers of alternate history? And this was asked by Jonathan Barry. It's a difficult question to answer. I would try to find an alternate history book that covers an era that you're familiar with, because it'd be a lot easier for you to understand the history and things that are going on, in my opinion. So if you don't know anything about the American Civil War, your first alternate history book probably shouldn't be a Civil War alternate history. If you know something about World War II, great. There's a lot of World War II alternate histories that you can study. I think it's a great gateway is to like read what you know, essentially, because you're going to understand the references and the changes a lot better. And then once you do that, you can start branching off to some more obscure bits of history for yourself. And so, yeah, I'm sorry if you're expecting a specific book, but the more I think about this, the more I feel like you have to read what you know, because if you read something from an era of history you don't know anything about, you might seem lost. Granted, at the same time, you might feel motivated to learn a little bit more about that history, and that couldn't be good. But I still would try to go for some era of history you know. That's my recommendation. So I'm not on a specific book, but just a sort of like advice to read what you know at first and then branch off, because then hopefully you'll be more motivated to learn more about other eras of history that are written about. So, all right, that was my last question. So thanks again, guys, for everything. My next video is going to be about what if Quebec voted to become independent in 1995. So stay tuned for that what if video. It has been a while since I've done a what if video, hasn't it? But anyway, so yeah, thanks again. Questions were awesome. I had a really good time, and I hope to do this again when I reach 10,000 subscribers. So I'm really looking forward to that. So anywho, I'm Matt Mitrovich, the Alternate Historian. Bye.